I am watching this footage over and over again and I still cannot believe what Bron Breakker just did to Paul Heyman on SmackDown. This wasn't just an attack, this was attempted murder on live television. This was a second-generation superstar completely losing his mind and crossing every single line that exists in professional wrestling. Paul Heyman is a 58-year-old non-wrestler, a manager, someone who's never claimed to be a physical competitor, and Bron Breakker just put him through hell in a way that was absolutely sickening to watch. And you know what makes me furious? WWE filmed this. They aired it. They presented it like it was entertainment when what we actually witnessed was a young wrestler destroying a legendary manager's body for shock value. This isn't edgy television, this isn't pushing boundaries, this is reckless and dangerous, and someone needs to be held accountable before something even worse happens. Paul Heyman is broken. He's legitimately injured. Medical personnel had to stretcher him out of the arena. His face was covered in blood. He was screaming in genuine agony. That wasn't selling, that wasn't performance, that was real pain from real damage inflicted by someone who clearly lost all sense of control and professionalism. Let me paint the complete picture of what happened because every single detail makes this more disturbing and unacceptable. Bron Breakker came to the ring fuming. You could see the rage in his eyes from the moment his music hit. This is a man who's been attacked by Bronson Reed, who's been dealing with interference from various people, who's been frustrated by not getting opportunities he feels he deserves. The anger was building for weeks. But instead of taking out his frustrations on another wrestler, someone who's actually trained to take bumps, someone who's prepared for physical confrontation, someone who can defend themselves, Bron decided to target Paul Heyman, a 58-year-old advocate. A man whose job is to talk, not to take German suplexes and spears. Heyman was at ringside representing one of his clients. The exact details don't even matter because nothing justifies what happened next. Bron's music hits, he storms down the ramp like a man possessed, and he makes a beeline straight for Heyman. Paul's eyes go wide with fear, genuine fear, because he knows he's in danger and there's nothing he can do about it. Heyman tries to back away. He's putting his hands up in a defensive gesture. He's trying to talk Bron down, probably saying something like, "Hold on, let's talk about this," because that's what Heyman does, he talks. He's a manager. His weapons are his words, not his fists. But Bron is beyond reason. He's beyond listening. He's in a pure rage state where nothing matters except inflicting violence. Bron grabs Heyman by his shirt. Heyman is pleading with him, you can see his mouth moving, see the desperation in his body language. But Bron doesn't care. He throws Heyman toward the ring like he's a rag doll. Heyman stumbles, nearly falls, barely catches himself on the ring apron. He's terrified. You can see it in every movement. And then Bron does the unthinkable. He hits Paul Heyman, a 58-year-old non-wrestler, with a spear. The same devastating spear that Bron uses to destroy trained athletes. The same move that's put actual wrestlers on the shelf. He hits an elderly manager with it at full force. The sound of the impact was sickening. Heyman's body folded in half. His head snapped back. He collapsed to the mat like he'd been shot. And you could immediately tell this wasn't a work. This wasn't a planned spot where Heyman knew how to protect himself. This was real damage happening in real time. But Bron wasn't done. Oh no, the spear wasn't enough for him. Heyman is laying there motionless, clearly hurt, possibly seriously injured, and Bron is still in a rage. He picks Heyman up, this broken 58-year-old man who can barely stand, and he hits him with a gorilla press power slam. He lifts Heyman high above his head and slams him into the mat with all his strength. Heyman's body bounced off the canvas. His limbs went limp. The crowd went from cheering Bron's intensity to complete silence because everyone in that arena realized they just watched something go way too far. This wasn't wrestling anymore, this was assault. And still Bron wasn't satisfied. Heyman is laying there, blood starting to trickle from his mouth, barely conscious, and Bron is screaming at him. Incoherent rage. Just yelling about disrespect and being held back and everyone being against him. The words don't even matter because the look in Bron's eyes was absolutely terrifying. This was a man who had completely lost control. Finally, referees and road agents started flooding the ring to pull Bron away. It took multiple people to restrain him. He was trying to get back to Heyman, still wanting to inflict more damage. The officials are screaming at him, physically holding him back, and Bron is fighting against them like a wild animal. Meanwhile, medical personnel rush to Paul Heyman's side. They're checking his vitals, stabilizing his neck, calling for a stretcher. Heyman is conscious but barely. He's moaning in pain, clutching his ribs, blood on his face. The camera zooms in and you can see his eyes, dazed, unfocused, clearly suffering from either a concussion or worse. They load Heyman onto a stretcher. The crowd is silent now. All the energy has been sucked out of the building because everyone just witnessed something that felt genuinely wrong. This wasn't the kind of beatdown that gets people excited for a revenge match. This was uncomfortable. This was disturbing. This crossed from entertainment into something dark and problematic. As they're wheeling Heyman up the ramp, Bron breaks free from the officials and tries to attack him again. On the stretcher. Medical personnel have to literally shield Heyman with their bodies while more security rushes in to finally subdue Bron. It takes 6 people to drag him backstage. Now let's talk about why this is completely unacceptable on multiple levels. First and foremost, Paul Heyman is not a wrestler. He's a manager. He's an advocate. He's a talker. He's 58 years old. His body is not conditioned to take the kind of punishment that trained wrestlers dish out. He doesn't know how to properly bump. He doesn't have the muscle memory to protect himself. Hitting him with moves designed for wrestlers is incredibly dangerous. This is the same reason why in traditional wrestling booking, managers take minimal physical abuse. Maybe they take a slap or a shove. Maybe they get put in a submission hold that looks painful but is actually quite safe. But you don't spear them. You don't power slam them. You don't subject their bodies to the kind of impact that could cause serious, lasting injury. Bron Breakker knows this. He comes from a wrestling family. His father Rick Steiner and his uncle Scott Steiner are legends who understand the business inside and out. Bron was raised around this industry. He knows the difference between working with a trained wrestler and working with a manager. So for him to throw that knowledge out the window and attack Heyman with full force is absolutely inexcusable. And let's talk about the very real possibility that Paul Heyman is legitimately injured. We're hearing reports of possible broken ribs, potential concussion, neck trauma. This isn't storyline injury, this is real medical concern. Heyman might be out for weeks or months recovering from what Bron did to him. That's someone's actual health and well-being that's been compromised. Paul Heyman has given decades to this business. He's one of the greatest minds in professional wrestling history. He's helped make countless stars. He's been instrumental in some of the most memorable storylines ever. He's a legend who deserves to be treated with respect and care. And Bron Breakker just potentially ended his in-ring career, or worse, caused injuries that could affect his quality of life. WWE has a responsibility here. They have a duty of care to all their employees, including non-wrestling personnel like managers. They can't allow their wrestlers to attack people who aren't trained to handle that kind of physical confrontation. This isn't the Attitude Era where anything goes and safety is an afterthought. This is 2024. We have wellness policies. We have concussion protocols. We have standards. So what is WWE going to do about this? Is Bron Breakker going to face actual consequences? Or are they going to treat this like it's just another wrestling angle and move on next week like nothing happened? Because if they don't take this seriously, they're basically telling their roster that it's okay to attack non-wrestlers, that it's acceptable to cross the line from performance into genuine violence. Bron Breakker needs to be suspended immediately. Not a kayfabe suspension where he still appears on TV, a real suspension where he's removed from programming and doesn't get paid. He needs to face fines. He needs mandatory anger management. He needs to publicly apologize to Paul Heyman, to the locker room, and to the fans. There need to be real consequences for what he did. But here's what really makes me angry: WWE probably planned this. They probably sat in a creative meeting and decided, let's have Bron destroy Heyman for shock value. They probably convinced Paul to take these bumps with promises that it'll be safe and controlled. They probably pressured a 58-year-old man to put his body on the line for their storyline. If that's true, if WWE management orchestrated this knowing the risks, then they're complicit in whatever injuries Heyman suffered. They put an employee in danger for entertainment. That's not just poor judgment, that's potentially criminal negligence. Workplace safety laws exist for a reason. And let's address the character assassination this represents for Bron Breakker. Bron has been built as an intense, aggressive competitor, but he's also been presented as someone who respects the business. Someone who understands the heritage he carries. Someone who's channeling his family's legacy. He's a Steiner. That name means something in wrestling. But attacking a 58-year-old manager? That doesn't make him look tough, it makes him look like a bully. It makes him look like someone who picks on people who can't defend themselves. It makes him look cowardly. That's not the kind of heat you want for a future main eventer. If WWE wanted Bron to have a big violent moment, there were so many better ways to do it. Have him destroy multiple wrestlers in one night. Have him attack someone his own size with similar intensity. Have him wreck the entire locker room area in a backstage rampage. Any of those options would have made him look dangerous without crossing ethical lines. But attacking Paul Heyman? That's lazy booking designed purely for shock. It's WWE saying, how do we get people talking, and choosing the most controversial option without thinking about the consequences. It's prioritizing the immediate social media reaction over long-term character development and workplace safety. The locker room has to be in shock right now. Every manager, every interviewer, every non-wrestling personnel just watched one of their colleagues get destroyed on television. How are they supposed to feel safe? How are they supposed to do their jobs knowing that wrestlers might snap and attack them at any moment? Kayla Braxton probably saw that and thought, that could be me. Kathy Kelly might be reconsidering whether she wants to do backstage interviews. Every manager on the roster just learned that they're not safe from physical violence despite not being trained wrestlers. That's a toxic work environment. And what about the fans? What kind of message does this send to the audience? That it's okay for young, strong men to violently attack older people who can't fight back. That rage justifies assault. That there are no consequences for losing control. Those are dangerous messages to send, especially to young, impressionable viewers. Professional wrestling has always had a responsibility to balance entertainment with appropriate messaging. Yes, we have heels who do bad things, but there are usually consequences. Justice typically prevails eventually. The good guys win. But when you show graphic violence against a defenseless older person and present it as just Bron being intense, you're normalizing something that should never be normalized. Some of you are probably thinking it's just a show. It's not real, but the injuries are real. The 58-year-old body taking spears and power slams is real. The potential long-term health consequences are real. You can't just wave that away with "it's entertainment." Moreover, even if we accept this as pure fiction, it's still problematic fiction. Good storytelling doesn't require showing young wrestlers destroying elderly managers. There are countless ways to tell intense, violent stories without crossing into genuinely disturbing territory. The irony is that this could actually hurt Bron Breakker's career in the long run. If fans turn on him, not as a heel they love to hate, but as someone they're genuinely disgusted by, WWE will have damaged one of their most promising young stars. Bron has incredible potential. He's athletic, charismatic, has a legendary name, and all the tools to be a future world champion. But if he becomes associated with this kind of gratuitous violence against non-wrestlers, if he becomes the guy who went too far, that stink might never wash off. WWE could inadvertently ruin his trajectory by having him do something so extreme that fans can't get past it. And let's talk about Paul Heyman's perspective. This man has dedicated his life to professional wrestling. He's been in the business since the 1980s. He's managed some of the greatest wrestlers of all time. He's been instrumental in developing talent and creating legendary moments. And potentially one of his last memories in the business might be getting destroyed by someone young enough to be his son. That's not how Paul Heyman's story should end. He deserves to go out on his own terms. He deserves a retirement filled with accolades and appreciation. He deserves to be celebrated as the legend he is. Not stretched out of an arena with potential career-ending injuries because some creative meeting decided shock value was more important than respect. The wrestling business needs to do better. We've evolved past the days where managers regularly took unprotected chair shots and dangerous bumps. We've recognized that not everyone on the roster needs to be subjected to the same physical punishment. We've established protocols to protect people. But moments like this show, we're still willing to abandon those standards when we want a moment. WWE needs to issue a statement about this. They need to address Paul Heyman's condition. They need to explain what consequences Bron Breakker will face. They need to assure their employees and their audience that workplace safety matters. Silence is not an option here. Adam Pearce and Nick Aldis, the authority figures on Raw and SmackDown, need to address this on television. There needs to be on-screen acknowledgement that what Bron did was unacceptable. There need to be visible, meaningful consequences that demonstrate WWE takes this seriously. But I'm not holding my breath. Because WWE has a pattern of doing something controversial, letting it generate buzz and outrage, and then quietly moving on without addressing the underlying issues. They'll probably have Bron come out next week, cut a promo about being out of control, and that'll be the end of it. Meanwhile, Paul Heyman will be recovering from real injuries. His family will be worried about his health. He'll be dealing with pain and potential long-term complications. But WWE will have gotten their viral moment, their social media engagement, their controversial segment. And that's apparently all that matters. The sad reality is that this kind of content actually works from a business perspective. People are talking about it. Social media is blowing up. This video is going to get tons of views because people want to see the footage and hear the outrage. WWE gets the attention they wanted. So from their perspective, mission accomplished. But at what cost? At the cost of a legend's health. At the cost of workplace safety. At the cost of sending terrible messages. At the cost of potentially damaging a young star's career. The short-term gains are not worth the long-term problems this creates. This is WrestlingNewsCC, and I am disgusted by what Bron Breakker did to Paul Heyman. This attack crossed every line of acceptable behavior. Drop your comments below and tell me if you think WWE went too far with this segment. Tell me what consequences Bron should face. Share this video because this conversation needs to happen. Paul Heyman deserves better. The WWE locker room deserves better. The fans deserve better. We deserve wrestling that's intense and dramatic without resorting to genuinely dangerous attacks on non-wrestlers. We deserve storytelling that respects both the performers and the audience. Bron Breakker attacking Paul Heyman wasn't compelling television, it was disturbing. It wasn't building a star, it was creating a problem. It wasn't entertainment, it was exploitation, and WWE needs to be held accountable for allowing it to happen. If Paul Heyman has serious injuries from this attack, WWE needs to cover all his medical expenses. They need to provide whatever rehabilitation he needs. They need to take care of someone who's given his life to this business. That's the least they can do after putting him in this position. And going forward, WWE needs to establish clear boundaries about what's acceptable when it comes to physical confrontations involving non-wrestlers. Managers should be protected. Interviewers should be protected. Anyone who's not specifically trained to take wrestling bumps should not be subjected to full-force wrestling moves. This isn't about being soft or not understanding wrestling. This is about basic human decency and workplace safety. This is about recognizing that some people on the roster aren't physically prepared to handle certain types of content. This is about treating everyone with respect and care. Bron Breakker needs to understand that there are lines you don't cross. That being intense doesn't mean being reckless. That building your character doesn't require putting legends in the hospital. That true toughness includes knowing when to show restraint. WWE needs to understand that shock value without substance is empty. That viral moments mean nothing if they damage your performers. That ratings and social media engagement aren't worth sacrificing the health and safety of your employees. And we as fans need to demand better. We need to stop accepting this kind of content just because it's presented to us. We need to voice our concerns when lines are crossed. We need to hold WWE accountable for the product they put on television. Paul Heyman left SmackDown broken and bloodied. Bron Breakker's pure rage created a moment that was disturbing rather than entertaining, and WWE needs to answer for it. This is not okay. This is not acceptable. And we should not be silent about it. The business has to be better. The booking has to be smarter. The boundaries have to be clearer. Because if they're not, we're going to see more incidents like this. More people getting hurt unnecessarily. More lines being crossed for diminishing returns. Bron Breakker going wild on Paul Heyman was a mistake. A dangerous, problematic mistake that needs to be acknowledged and corrected. And until WWE does that, they're showing that they value content over people. And that's something no wrestling company should ever do.